Okay, welcome. So I hope you enjoyed Unit 1 and the flyby agricultural history lessons that we had. Of course, the role of tobacco and potato were explored, but I think you realize now that corn and wheat also played big roles according to the video series, and cotton. So there's a lot of crops, and I wish we could do more justice and more to covering. But that'll give you a little taste anyway of a little of how our society and how many modern societies came to be. Of course, in your history class, you'll learn about the Sumerians. And as you follow the structure of civilization through time, you'll see that there is always a role that water, land, and agriculture played, the role that water and land played in agriculture. Which caused these major centers and cities to develop. Without water, there's no sense in, of course, settling a land. You need a supply of water. That's the number one thing. And of course, a space to build on. So we're going to go through a lecture, and I'll try not to be too long. I'm not going to go on each slide. I'll try to hit each slide, but a lot of these slides, particularly the ones at the end, just want you to spend some time kind of studying them. It's going to take a little time looking at just what the graph is telling you. So now we pick up a little bit with today, and we'll continue to make references at least back to the early 1900s, 19th and 20th centuries, even starting in this lecture. So this week will be world populations, food insecurity, and our response to that food insecurity. And that's where we'll pick up. And you can read, of course, the introduction to Unit 2 on Blackboard. So world population, agriculture's grand challenge. It's a difficult and important problem of global significance, right? And we've identified efforts, increased efforts to solve. I'm going to blow this up a little bigger there. There we are. You can see the slides coming up here on the left-hand side. I will actually hide my face here. Okay, so what is a society? Well, it's a body of individuals living as members of a community. There's a society here in Springfield, and within Springfield, there are multiple societies, and there's a community there at MSU even, in all the stores, the shops, the life experiences, the education, the way we go about our daily lives, interacting with each other comprises the society we live in. And the university and business and some of the business of commerce all contribute either by tax dollars, the money you pay, or by some way, some kind of service that makes wanting to be here, makes you want to be here, right? So it's a body of individuals living as members of a community, but that can be as simple as the hunting and gathering community, where maybe the ladies stayed home and the men went out to hunt. They come back, they all prepare a big meal, one big meal a day in the evening time. Agriculturalist, pastoralist, horticulturalist. So there's all kinds of societies, and they function by some set of rules, but basic needs do have to be met. So successful societies that continue to build, grow, and thrive, because everybody seems to be, in history, today might be an exception to this, but for the most part, everybody wants to have a family. Everybody wants to find that special somebody, and then have a life with that someone, and then give birth to new life, which is some outflow representation of themselves, right? Of that love. So you think about that, and there is no place to go. We kind of saw this in the world's worst mistake, where we kind of debated over whether we should have gone to the ag system or stayed hunting and gathering. And the bottom line is that desire to have offspring, have children, to have little mini-me's running around, cause you to grow. And when you're a hunter-gatherer, and just to say, certain societies can only support a certain population, right? So there's reasons why we were able to grow over the years, and why and how societies grew. So these are the things right here: oxygen, water, food, clothing, and shelter. So much so that our government has in place a poverty line, a poverty level, where if you don't have, there's laws in place for clean air to breathe. You should be able to have access to water coming to your home, a minimal amount of food to stay alive. And if not, of course, there's government help and welfare programs, clothing and shelter programs, and things like this, because these are the basic needs, rights of every human life. Now, what that standard is continually is revised and revisited. And some of that comes down to the politics and policy and such. Plus, other psychological human needs. Is it enough to have beans and rice every day? Is it enough to have peanut butter and bread every day? Are you happy with eating the same tuna fish and mac and cheese every day? Technically, you would have food, right? And so you should be happy. But is this really good? Are you getting all your nourishment from a single simple kind of food eaten? Well, we learned there what happened with potato and such, and eating just a single diet or fish. So being able to know that the next day you have access to that food, that it's going to be a variety of food, significance in our own lives and how we contribute to that society. Are we able to help provide water or food or clothing, connection to each other? We'll see some slides in the future here that even the simplest societies live very happy with very little because of their connection to each other, to their community, and how they contribute. Growth, contribution. Those are all important things to a successful society. So here comes environmentalist paradox. They want to keep, of course, and we all do, want to keep a level of biodiversity. It's just nature brings an amount of psychological health. There is beauty and value in creation, but nonetheless, we have to use those resources and goods to feed us and to give us habitat and recreation and things. So it's become agriculture's grand challenge, because there is no doubt, as we'll see in coming lectures, that agriculture uses the most land and the most water of any other sector. Industrial uses are high as well, and both are much, much higher than individual needs are. Looking at just, say, a household or even a society's need for bathing, drinking, their lawn and such. So ag plays no doubt a large role in that conservation. A report from McGill University states it this way: over the past 40 years, human well-being has been steadily improving, while natural ecosystems from which we derive those many goods and services have been declining. So there were 4 hypotheses they came up with, not listed here, but these are the 4 trends that we're going to consider in this class or over the next few weeks. All right. So human population and well-being, that's this week and a little bit of next week. The status of vital ecosystem services, being able to maintain that human population and well-being, given the food, water, timber, fiber, and fuel that is available to us now. And then global climate change. How is using these resources to feed the human population and care for it affecting the climate? And sometimes there are things going on in our climate that we have no control over, say in decadal or centurial cycles. How do we continue to grow and live successfully within climate change time that we are? And in all of that, maintaining biodiversity. Diverse ecosystems are the strongest ecosystems that are able to survive extreme conditions. And this is kind of laid forth best by Thomas Malthus. This is somebody whom Charles Darwin relied heavily upon in his theories as population and survival of the fittest. And that was because of this idea that nature and plants, while they and animals produce far more offspring than the environment can support. There's not enough. Ultimately, land and water will run out. I mean, at an extreme view, there will be a limit. That only so many squirrels can feed out of your yard. Only so many dogs can live in your house. Only so many children can be supported in your house, right? So there is a limit to food, habitat, space. I grew up sharing a room all my life. You know, and only one person gets to eat the last Oreo cookie in the house, right? There's just a limit to these factors. So the idea, the theory states that uh, food production will not be able to keep up with the growth in the human population, resulting in disease, famine, war, and ultimately calamity. So this graph here is showing the basic principle of population. And so arithmetic growth occurs like this in a straight line, 2, 4, 6, as the years go on. What we are seeing as, again, these things have increased, and as we have increased steadily, is that we have exponential growth going on, okay? So we're going to see and kind of dissect that, but the idea here is we can't continue to grow forever. We see this in populations of small organisms, crabs on the beach, spiders, insects are the easiest versus say whales and sharks, elephants. You know, a lot of time put in just 1 or 2 offspring gives them a long life. They have long gestation versus say spiders and small bugs, insects. We'll have, in birds sometimes, we'll have 2 clutches per year, and they put out hundreds, fish will put out hundreds of eggs to hope that a few hundred get fertilized, to hope that just a few, right, grow up to live into adults. And most of those other eggs are caviar, right? They become food for the ocean, food for the rivers and streams. You know, frog eggs, you've seen those in a pond, you know, these big sacks. And they're just tadpoles all over the bank of that pond. They're not going to all survive. You're not going to have a plague of frogs anytime soon, because those frogs, half of them will die by natural causes probably, and almost another half will become food, and then a few will live to grow up and to reproduce. So not all animals or plants survive, but they do their darn bestest. And I tell you what, if you look high in our ionosphere, you're going to see pollen from Africa. You're going to see it from all over the world. Trees are trying to lay down their roots everywhere they can, but the environment is not suited everywhere they try to shoot them. So where we see those plants growing successfully are going to be in the areas that those plants are adapted for primarily. So we have some historically significant famines. You can go through this. Right here to note, and even in more recent times, but I don't want to, again, I had this already recorded at 30 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this to 20 minutes, and I'm already going slow here. So Ag's Grand Challenge: adequately feed more people with fewer resources while protecting the environment as well. That's a big challenge. That is a big challenge because the population is not getting smaller. Even if the growth rate is decreasing, the population is still increasing. So we want to try to feed as many people with less resources and protect the environment at the same time. By the year 2050, global population is predicted to reach about 9 to 11 billion people. And that's going to demand about 50 to 100% more food. Now, that was stated in 2005. This number has been updated. It is not that drastic as it turns out, but it doesn't mean it's still not a severe situation. So what are some of the challenges to this demand? Well, water quality and quantity, soil health, the loss of genetic diversity, and pesticide resistance. So as we try to combat pests of all sorts, they sometimes grow resistant. They can wipe out entire crops. And if we don't have a diverse crop selection, if we can't get back to natural habitat to pull those genes where the evolutionary war is constant, that is, where plants are continually adapting to the natural environment, building up resistance to those pests, we need to have that resource. So if we can, by breeding methods, somehow get those genes out of those plants and put them into our cultivated crops, So we'll always have a food source as a very important aspect of food security. And that has to do with this genetic diversity that we find in wild plants, say wild corn or wheat, pesticide resistance, and how we use our pesticides, as well as then, of course, keeping the soil healthy, because whatever goes into our soil oftentimes leaches into our water systems. So that's one challenge. The way our population is distributed. So in these next few slides, it's just kind of showing the case here. And we'll talk about arable land and quantity of water available. But I just want you to look at this map and see where most of the population lies here, of course. About Midwest and eastward, it gets heavily populated in the United States. Mexico, a little heavier still. We got Brazil, Rio de Janeiro down here. We have Colombia, in South America. You look at Africa, one of the fastest growing populations is in Africa. And here is that Saharan desert that has just grown and grown. And as that Saharan desert grows, there's less and less land available to grow food on. And there's a higher population density right in this belt with less land to grow food for them on. Do you see the compounding problem there? India, greater still. Now, China has made great strides. We all know that China has a very large population, but they are actually, in the last 20 years, have probably made the most strides of any other nation towards being an independent or net exporter of food instead of an importer. We've got some really severe areas here in India, and this is the next focus place right there. So Africa, India, China, and of course us. These are the areas that we're going to be concerned with in future lectures here. So just take some time to get some of, here's a hunger map, 2015. Again, we're going to see these colors change. We're going to see these numbers change in time as people, as the population progresses. Here's the state of it for Kibera, Kenya, Bangladesh. So many people, so many resources used, so much trash, so much of the environment damaged, and a lot of it's not their fault. It's infrastructure, it's government, it's politics, it's business leaders, it's restaurants, it's everybody choosing to do something. And in even these cases, it's probably just going to be education. Here's another one, population growth. Click on this, look at the video or the website there, and click around, scope out. Look how dark this is. See what this represents. Projected world population, 1950 to 2100. Of course, we're right in this middle area, 2020. And we're hitting at about 8 billion people, getting close to it. And this is what we can project depending on certain conditions, which we'll talk about. So here's a population pyramid, 1950, 2017, 60 million men and women at the various ages and years, of course, less and less. This is a very informative graph, actually. I'm trying to fly through a few of these. Whoops, this one's best read if we put it into the show. So the time it took for the world population to double, given about 1543. It's pretty quick, right? Now we're coming up. It's just amazing growth in a short amount of time. That's that geometrical growth or exponential growth Thomas Malthus was referring to. Well, there is good news in that education is getting out, health is getting better, and because there's better health, there's less death, and because there's less death, there's not as many, there's not as much of an overpopulation issue. So let me explain that one a little bit maybe. So you see here, this one says least developed countries, less developed regions or areas, and then you have the more developed regions. And look at their growth rates. So all of them are declining, right? Even the least developed countries, the projected growth rates. Now, this is not the growth number. This is the growth rate. That is the rate at which the population grows. That is declining. Of course, the numbers, when you have 7 billion people all having 2 kids, that's going to be a larger number, right? Not all those children will survive, sadly, due to various reasons, and some of that is nutrition. Here's another picture. So here's 1716. We can see the growth rate. This is in red. Annual growth rate is what I'm looking at. You can look at the population numbers will always continue to go up. And we have a big increase right here. But this is real interesting. Right around 1920s to the 1960s, you have the baby boomers. You have a very high growth rate between the World War II and Vietnam War at 2.1%. Around Vietnam, you can see that the growth rate declines drastically. Right in here, that's my generation, Generation X, around 1980. And then it kind of comes down, and you can see a drastic drop in millennials, and this is about 2020. This is where we are now. So everyone's getting their one, used to be, you know, my one boy and my one girl, and I'm happy. Back over here in this generation, they were having my grandparents, my parents even, you know, had families of 3 to 5, and it wasn't uncommon to have maybe even 7 children. But Generation Xers had mostly 3, maybe 2. 4 was a big family. And now 2 is the perfect number, and my life is happy. And even at that, a lot of them just have their one child. We have a lot of no brothers, no sisters. This is a choice given, of course, the environment, given what we've learned. We know in China for many years they had the one child rule. Now they've lifted that as of, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago. And now they are allowed to have 2 children. So this population rate has declined, but the growth, of course, will go up. And this is why it's going to level off right about here. Okay. Again, spend some time on a few slides. I want to jump through some of these others. Population projections coming up. Look at this. What do these lines represent? Look up here at the nations and areas. The one to draw attention to is this purple. Who is that? Africa. Again, this is where a lot of our focus is going to go in food security for the future. It's where the world's focus should go. It went to China, and China has done very well for itself. And as a matter of fact, they're becoming, again, very independent. And you'll see that, let's see, Asia, the green line right here, is actually coming down. Patterns of population change. This is what happens in rapid, slow, and negative. You can click on that link there. Watch the world age. This is very interesting. Actually, you would be probably very interested to see this, but soon the majority of the world will be 30 in their 30s. That's the bottom line there, but it's really cool to watch it change because right now it's older people, but that make up the majority of the population. But the majority of the population is going to be getting younger and younger, I believe. Go ahead and click on that and watch that video. So Japan's population declines for the first time since 1920s. That made big news. So let's pop quiz here. Ready? World population is increasing at a decreasing rate. Is that true or false? You can go back to the slides or in the lecture, see what the answer is. Slides 15 and 16. Here's another one. Which of the following regions is experiencing significant population growth? I made reference to this about 2 or 3 times already. Otherwise, you can go back to slide 17 to check your answer there. So the last little topic here is demographic transitions. Every large society or successful developmental society goes through this. So spend some time on this slide first, understanding the 5 stages, where we have our birth rate and death rate. So birth rate, of course, and death rate is the number of births a given year. Death rate is the number of deaths a given year. If you take the difference, you have your overall population growth. So look how stage 1, you have birth rate is high, death rate is high. And this is generally your developing nations. Okay, you're giving a lot of, you're trying to have a lot of children because there's a high mortality. There's a good chance that the children won't live. And so the natural increase is a stable or a slow increase. As education, agriculture, both increase. You enter a stage 2 of transition where you have rapid increase because you maintained your high birth rate, and due to progress in medicine, education, agriculture, and good food, you have the death rate declines. And so because the death rate declined, those who are being born are living, and this begins to increase the population, the blue area. So you continue with that thought process and read through stage 3, 4, and 5. You can pause this to do that. All right, so here we're seeing mortality rate. Again, it's the probability per 1,000 is right down here, 50, 100, and 150, 1, 2, and 3%. It is population growth rate, the percentage change, and then fertility rate is the average number of births per woman, okay? And that's the orange line. And it's good to see that the mortality rate, as the mortality rate lowers, so does the fertility rate. And that's because the children are surviving. So if the children are surviving, they're not going on having more children in the hopes that they all live when they know half will probably die. But they know they're going to live, and it's a good environment. In their demographic transitions, maybe stage 3, then they'll probably stop at 2, 3, or 4 children instead of having 5, 8, or 10 children, where maybe half will die. So a low mortality rate is good, of course. So over the years, fertility rates in developed nations have declined to what we call replacement level. This is a very interesting trend. Over several generations now, for about 200 years. And early 1700s through the Great Depression. What does that mean? The fertility rates in developed nations declining. Choice, lifestyles. Fertility rates in developing countries are declining much faster now. It's not completely known as to why. Sub-Saharan Africa is the exception. They're just beginning that demographic transition that we talked about on the slide up here. Okay, so they're still back here in stage 1, they're working their way to stage 2 and 3. So responses to population growth. Go ahead and just read through these 3 slides. India as the example, all right? But bottom line is a lot of government, a lot of education, birth control. America helped Mexico a lot with their birth control, education, sending birth control over there in various forms as our neighbor. They're kind of flowing out. They're busting at their seams. We want to increase their health and their quality of life in order that they may invest in the few children that are born, again, as opposed to have many children and hope a few survive. All right. So, which of the following regions is expected to have a population loss? Well, we should know it's not A, and it's not B, although it will also, but likely going to be Europe. And you can see the previous slides. True, false. Population increases during a demographic transition because death rates decline, but birth rates increase. Is that true or false? All right. Growth factors affecting population. I'm going to go ahead and begin to wrap this up because I feel like I'm getting to my time here. I have about 30 minutes, and this is already kind of longer than I wanted to go. This is an excellent TED Talk. You need to watch this. Hans Rosling, professor of global health in Sweden. You're going to be very interested to watch this lecture because there's a lot of misnomers out there as to why populations grow. Is it lack of education? Is it because their views of women? Is it because of religious beliefs? Is it because of foreign governments and aid and empowering? This is a powerful TED Talk you need to watch. Matter of fact, if you got this far, you should probably watch this one instead of me. All right, so there's some more the video and being able to answer this question. You got to watch the video to answer this question. So we'll continue to focus first on food production and the quality in the next 2 lectures, and then we'll switch to the environmental concerns. But here are some of the corrected values. As I mentioned early on, new data suggests that crop production only needs to increase by 25 to 70% rather than the 100% because technology is kicked up so quickly. Breeding and molecular breeding, the environmental protection. These are all continued factors. We are improving. Things are getting better, but we still have a great challenge in front of us. And there's no slowing down here because the population is not slowing down either. So there's 3 questions to discuss, to think about, and I'm going to end this now. Have a good evening.